out on John's land, there's also a spring there where you can go get some water. So it seems, there's abundant fresh water coming out, and I was just so enthralled by being able to get fresh water from the earth without having to buy it. And we were using glass bottles, and it was just a whole different experience. That kind of free fresh water.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying Grand Solar Minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
And those of you looking for information on primitive ways and also taking your own sovereignty back of food growing, preparation, and being able to support yourself in the wild or in a different set of situations. So today I have with me myself, David DuByne, Adapt 2030.
John Kitson from 5gawareness.com.
John Hickman from Primitive Ways on YouTube.
The coupling of all of the Grand Solar Minimum, the social credit score that we're seeing unfurled in China, and as we're looking at less food across the planet, you would anticipate some sort of disturbances in the cities, and this is where 5G would roll in. And then also, if you're going to take care of yourself during these times, you're going to have to be out of the cities. I'm going to start us off with a couple of headlines off of Electroverse today. Colorado, heavy snow breaks a 102-year-old record in Pueblo and cancels over 800 flights at Denver International Airport. Now, my personal thing is when I spoke at LeapCon in May of this year, 2019, my flight was canceled also because of record snowfall May 5th in Denver. And now we have, again, record snowfall canceling flights in the last day of October. So think about that. The entire summer was less than 5 months long. Now we're starting to see this over here in the UK. It seems to be really wet. When we drove around the last couple of days, seems to be record rainfall happening as we speak. Because when I was driving with these guys, they were like, no way, look at the river. No way, look at this stream. Whoa, how much water's there? So it seems to be an incredible amount of rainfall coming down in the UK. But for me, that's my baseline. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay. All-time record cold sweeps through Alberta, Canada. Now, this will break the record back to 1880. But why is it now that there's so much cold happening? More record low temperatures fall in British Columbia, including one from 1935 in solar cycle 16. That's a coastal area, so you think it would be more regulated by ocean temperatures, but here we are breaking records again and again and again. Now it's confirmed that the continental U.S. is the coldest since 1917, October temperature. That's a 100-year record that we're going through. So what is it that such difficult conditions are coming to our grow zones? And if you think about North America, Canada, fine. But then Southern Australia is setting all-time record cold temperatures as well back to 1913. This is in the spring in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, this is all my personal opinion to do with sunspots and solar cycles and solar activity. So if we take a look at the sun here, some indications, they're looking at this now is going to be the longest looming Grand Solar Minimum, as the amount of sunspotless days is more than the past 100 years. Now we can verify by science that we are back into at least the minimum, Grand Solar Minimum of Dalton intensity, which was a 1.5 C drop globally. Now we're starting to see all these news articles coming out explaining purple skies with volcanic aerosols and the ejection, cooling slightly the planet. So you can see the narrative shift already coming out. They're starting to switch the narrative from it was warming now there's purple skies and it's starting to cool because of volcanic ash. How are they going to explain why all these record cold? Because you know what? It's coming to the UK, and I'll let these guys talk about it here, John. Wild John and 5G John, because we got two Johns. We'll have to differentiate them.
And speaking of cycles, my new book with my co-author Bill Porter, Climate Revolution, a must-read for understanding our sun-driven climate. As we progress deeper into this new Eddy Grand Solar Minimum, weather extremes leading to global food scarcity and higher food prices are here now. This book describes the expected changes, how to survive and thrive during future challenging times, and also practical preparations. The entire book is interactive with over 250 links, so you can click and go out to the scientific aspect of what we're talking about with the repeating cycles in this Grand Solar Minimum. The science is explained so you understand the mechanisms. The solutions are there because we know we're going to face these exact same problems again that were faced in the Maunder Minimum, the Sporer Minimum, the Wolf Minimum. Find designs for building greenhouses, grow guides, beam soil techniques, as well as bioreactors to create your own growth hormones for the soil. Available now, the new Adapt 2030 Climate Revolution. The link's in the description box below.
Now again, I just want to split the hair here. And what's that in Fahrenheit? Like 19 or in the mid-teens for Fahrenheit temperatures.
It's the coldest winters that we haven't had winters like for a long time. So it's going to be interesting. The thing I noticed the most though is the short summers. That's what I'm really noticing. That the summer, kind of comes in and it literally stays for 3 months. We're getting 3-month summers now instead of 6. And a lot of extra rainfall, and I'm really noticing the effect that the rainfall has on the roads, the whole infrastructure on the roads. It's really damaging all the roads everywhere. Building trades really affected. Nobody can paint, nobody can build. The soil's staying so much wetter now. The trees are struggling. Obviously, they're having trouble getting air. But as soon as the storm comes in and it's been wet for a really long time, all the trees are blowing over, and this wet weather's for mold issues in houses for plants. It has a big effect, and I see it. I spend a lot of time outside, and I see the effects that the wet has, and it has a big effect. And the growing now with the short summer, it's mold problems at the end of the year, big mold problems. This is where we're going to have to come up with some new ideas, and in certain parts of the world to keep growing food, we're going to have to start coming up with some new ideas.
This is John Kitson from 5G Awareness on YouTube. And recently in Yahoo News, they came out with this, fact that, look, we're likely heading for this minus 14 centigrade winter, which is absolutely freezing. And in the UK, we haven't seen this for 30 years. And then 30 years ago, we were breaking a 200-year-old record. And it's expected that we're likely to have snow after snow events. So this could cause problems for delivery of food. Just over a year ago, we had problems where several days we had this constant snow. They couldn't get food to the shops. And it's just getting colder and colder. And meanwhile, what have we got? We've got the mainstream media saying the opposite, that we're actually heading to this warming, global warming. We're hearing nothing but this. But actually, on the ground, we're seeing it getting colder and colder. Like John said, this is going to bring in mold. We've got the crops are delayed this year. And the growing season's just been totally whacked out of sync. And this is a serious problem moving forward.
Yeah, it's affecting everything. And the other thing that happens as well with all the extra water, it's washing all the topsoils away. We're taking so many of the trees down across the country that when we have all this extra rain, it's just washing all the topsoil away. You just look at the colour of the rivers, see it all over the road, and the trees aren't there to hold the soil together anymore. I've seen this when I go down to Portugal and Spain. They chopped the trees down years ago for whatever reason. I'm sure it was when they built all their boats. And now with all the windy conditions and dry weather, you take the trees away, the topsoil's gone. You're changing the environment big time. So we're going to have to come up with a lot of new solutions to move through this. Sure, this is happening. I'm seeing it. I spend a lot of time outside. This is definitely going on. There is major shifts happening, and we have to prepare. We can use this as an opportunity to get creative and got to come up with some new ideas for sure.
We've had testimonials from farmers in our local area. We had David come to give a talk in Totnes just a couple of days ago, and they were also explaining that, look, the growing season's been delayed and that the rain is absolutely unbelievable, just day after rain, and we're seeing all these floods, and it's having an effect on the food supply, and our farmers are testifying to this.
Yeah, I want to throw in my own comment here. When I looked at this river yesterday and the day before when we drove up to the moors, this incredible highlands area, windswept, and you need to be prepared to go up there, let's say that. But it looked like a peat tea bag color. So as the flood was rushing over the rocks, it looked like it was tea, like steeped, tea bags, British tea. But it looked like the floods had rushed through like a peat bog area higher up in elevation and picked up all that color, the tannins color came down. It was the most bizarre color of a river I have ever seen. It looked like a river full of tea rushing over the boulders, and then you get all the different like darker browns and peat colors, not even black, but something on the browns. And I hadn't seen anything like that. I sat mesmerized watching the water rushing over the rocks with this tea-colored river. Wow. So these are the changes I saw firsthand. And then when we did go up to the highlands yesterday up in the moors, exceptionally cold, rainy, wind blowing. I thought it was going to snow there at some point because the elevation and the temperatures were getting down where started to get into the 40s up there when we were driving around. It just takes a couple more degrees lower, and I thought we were going to get snowfall already. And, Wild John over here, I should say from Primitive Ways, John Hickman, he spends a lot of time outdoors. I mean, bushcrafting and wildcrafting and survival crafting in the wild. He knows the changes because he's out there living in ways that, for most of us are so far out the box to think. So what have you been doing that, tell us a bit about some of because we were going to go up to your property and go get some spring water. Aquifer Springs coming out where people go get their own water. It's the freshest, most lush. You can feel it. The energy is different in the water when you drink it. But it's just coming out and people can go get their own free spring water right out there with 3 different, outlets coming out in the stone areas. And then, later the night when we were driving around, I was like, hey, can we go back to the spring? I want to get some more water. And they took me to a different one in town. So there are multiple springs around town where you can still go and just get your own fresh water, which is absolutely amazing. Out on John's land, there's also a spring there where you can go get some water. So it seems, there's abundant fresh water coming out. And I was just so enthralled by being able to get fresh water from the earth without having to buy it. And we were using glass bottles, and it was just a whole different experience. That kind of free fresh water.
TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
Free, fresh and good, clean water. Devon's a special place. It's not flat at all. As up and down, up and down, up and down. This is perfect kind of environment for the springs. You normally find springs halfway up a hill. You look at Devon on the OS maps from above, it's covered in springs. It's incredible. It's a special place to have large rivers, beautiful beaches, and English woodland all together. You don't find that many places. You really don't. But yeah, doing these skills has connected me with the environment so much that I'm yeah, really noticing the changes. We have a lot of disease problems with the trees at the moment, and I'm pretty sure this is to do with the damp conditions, because it's a fungal disease which is attacking the leaves from the outside. All of our ash trees have been hit with something called sudden Ash Dieback, and all of our horse chestnut trees, which have been grown in the UK for years and years and years across Europe, are now on the extinction list. I only found out about this the other day. I was like, whoa. The trees are really, really, really important for the kind of environment that the UK is. What these trees are supplying is absolutely vital. These trees for years and years and years have supplied the tannic acid, which is similar to the colour that David was talking about in the river. This darkness, it's tannic acid from the peat bogs up above, and you get the same stuff out of the horse chestnuts, from the bark and from the casings, and this can be used to tan leather. And now if you can make leather from the trees around and from the animals you're finding on the landscape, you can now make your shoes, belts, bags, tents, rope, basically anything that you need to survive in the colder climates. When you're in a warmer climate, it's not so much of an issue. You don't need so much stuff. But if you're going to move out into the colder regions, knowing how to make leather is vital. So understanding which plants have this tannic acid in is it's an essential thing to know. And this tannic acid that's in the trees, it's their immune system. It's in their bark. So the bark is like their skin. It's like our immune system. And the tannic acid is what they use to fight off any of the molds and funguses and things like this, and it also stops them from rotting. The willows here, they love growing in the water, so they produce the tannic acid to stop the trees from rotting. If I could take the tannic acid out of the plant and put it into my hide, it's going to preserve the hide and stop it from rotting. An incredible skill. So for me, the health of these trees is got to be noted, and we have to keep an eye and see what's going on with the effects in these weather changes that are coming.
How much do you think of that with wireless frequencies and geoengineering bending together, with the new 5G coming in, which John is so aware of here, John Kitson. And then we have the geoengineering from above, and then we have the different ionospheric heaters bending. But, with the 5G, I'm wondering how much of this illumination of frequency is on the ground level. So if you also have higher atmospheric disturbance electrically, and then you have a ground level, let's say up to 200 feet or 400 feet from the 5G system, now you're getting sandwiched from above and below. So I'm wondering, how many of these changes are natural? How many of these changes they're overriding on this natural cycle with a more electrified atmosphere with all these wave frequencies around us? And it just seems something's jumped the shark when this 5G network's been turned on here. Now, in the UK, it's already been turned on. In the States, we're still testing with it, and it's, under development still and being rolled out. But here, it's already in play. They're light years ahead of where we're going with this 5G in America. I'm not the one to really talk. That's why I'm bringing you the experts here to show the changes from the weather on the UK side, as well as the electro frequencies through the cities now. And the behavior of people, the behavior of animals, behavior of plants seems to have shifted. I don't know. You've described it much more eloquently than I.
Yeah, we've seen massive dieback, in the towns and the cities with the trees. We're seeing a lot of the greenery just turn brown now, as a lot of the trees are dying off, bark is breaking away. This 5G, it's a whole new range of frequencies. 5G is basically, the main definition, it's fifth generation. So we've got more 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. So more of what we currently have. A lot more antennas, plus 5G. So we've got all the way going up to 300 gigahertz. So we're just engulfed now, and there's no area on Earth really, on land, where there's zero background artificial radiation. And that's a real problem, because the Schumann resonance is the resonance of nature, and that's what basically as humans we resonate with best, and we're at our healthiest capacity. So you've got to go out into the ocean now to get real normal background radiation. And yeah, it's not just affecting the trees. Trees, you're going to see the effect straight off because their organs are on the outside. And you're going to see it in the insects. We've had possibly about a 60 to 80% decline in the insect population over the last 20 years. You used to drive along, you used to see insects on your windscreen. Now you just don't see them. And this is just affecting the whole sort of system of biodiversity, because the birds need the insects, and it's collapsing. And with this 5G, of course, we're seeing these little antennas going up on the street lights, and a specific frequency at 868 megahertz. That's a frequency used in the military for 3D mapping, scanning, and also targeting, beamforming. Now, this is the base of the rollout. The majority of the rollout is in the sub-gigahertz range. And then, of course, we're seeing these millimeter waves, but in the UK, it's mainly this lower frequency range. But this can be absolutely devastating because it travels so well. It goes through walls and just connects with everything. And that's what they need for the Internet of Things. So it's everything being connected wirelessly. And I first got into this through getting in touch with Mark Steele, and that's Steele with an E at the end, Steele. And Gateshead Council had taken him to court on a harassment order because he challenged councillors after repeated requests for them to address 5G, and they were just ignoring him. And we're seeing increases in stroke, heart attacks, cancers up there in Gateshead. And you can find all this online. There's lots on YouTube. There's a documentary, 5G Apocalypse. And I recommend everybody to sit down and watch this with your friends, with your family. Spread it to your local representatives. There's a lot of problems happening up there where they first trialed it. And now, of course, they're spreading it all around the UK. But the judge noted in that court case that the 5G threat must be debated. So, despite the attempts at censorship, the judge ruled in favor of Mark. We recently got a ban here in Totnes. I went to the council, explained, look, this is untested technology. This breaks the Nuremberg Code. Therefore, it's a humanitarian crime, and we cannot allow this to be rolled out on the people of this country and in other countries.
Following Mark's case as well, he just simply went in front of the town council and said, hey, we have a problem. They didn't want to hear it, and then they tried to silence him. But because he kept talking and trying to explain these wave frequencies and what they did, then they had him arrested, and then they put a harassment charge against him because he had the audacity to come into the city council and give a bunch of documents saying, hey, this is going to hurt our children, this is going to hurt our families, this is dangerous for the city. But the city council was getting kickbacks, of course, to roll out the 5G from the companies. And how is that you can't even go into a public debate? It was a public debate space open for the public, just like we have in America when we go into our town councils and you get the floor for a allotted amount of time, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. So imagine you walk into the town council for your 10-minute speak, and then you start talking about 5G, and everybody on our subcommittees up in the towns are saying, no, you can't talk about that. And if you talk about it, you're going to be arrested. And you're like, wait a second. I'm here to talk for my own local town and the town council as an independent person with our allotted time. They're like, no, you can't talk about it. If you talk about it, you'll be arrested. This is what happened. That is insane how much censorship is going on, where you can't even bring it up in a town hall meeting, that they're so afraid of you bringing up this technology. And, myself talking about the Grand Solar Minimum, people try to scoff that off in a second, but the changes are too apparent now, so they're definitely going to have to start thinking about a narrative shift as we move forward. So, for example, I want to come back to John here from Primitive Ways. Talking about the cool affecting our plants. Here's another one. Our crops have been, reduced greatly through the United States and Canada this year due to the all-time record floods in America, the incredibly late planting season, which our plants and our crops didn't start growing until about a month and a half or 2 months late. Now we have these early freezes. We had the 2 blizzards already. But now this is to add a little bit of cherry on the top for the destruction of the crops this year.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.